Hello, today I'm starting a new series on Jupiter through the houses. So I'm going to go through Jupiter's, because obviously it's the most benevolent of all planets. So I'm going to go through all the indications just so that we can learn a little bit more about it. And then we go through for the different ascendants. And so Jupiter is obviously Jiva Karaka, the very first thing, and that is the planet of vitality and life, basically. So it's the most benefic of all planets, and the ruler of the natural ninth and 12th house of the zodiac. So Sagittarius and Pisces are ruled by Jupiter. They're completely different there in their feeling. Jupiter in the ninth house will be more for pilgrimage, education, higher education, doctorates, master's degrees, justice, law, culture. It's a trinal house, and it's all those kind of Sagittarius, much more focused, much more preaching, religious, knowledgeable, and high wisdom. In Pisces, it's much more optimistic, much more letting go, much more to do with the vision of the bigger picture, making things very spiritual, and travel. Both of them actually has of travel, both ninth and 12th house. Ninth house is obviously more like pilgrimage, where you go and come back. So you might go either for religious reasons or for education when it's activated, and you will return home. And so let's have a look at the kind of things to do with that. It's obviously a planet of morals, courtesy, and devotion. And it's open-minded, spiritual. And Jupiter is also the significator of natural houses, second house, fifth, ninth and 11th house of the zodiac. So by that I mean that it rules house of family, wealth, values, opportunities, children, obviously, with fifth house and everything, luck, happiness, growth, education, travel, and knowledge. It's the significator of teachers and role models that we attract. People who guide us through life and help us to actually put us on our path, our dharma, and give us knowledge and higher knowledge. It's also the significator of children, which is our most creative part of a human being, and is obviously creations and being creative, and all of that is very massive part of human life, really. It's also like when we got a really good fifth house, all things to do with the fifth house are really magical to us. It's so creative, and it's so willing to be self-sacrificing and devotional towards our child. It's very romantic. It's really rules like the physical heart, like Leo, that kind of thing. So it's just pretty outstanding, really. And they are like our biggest blessings of life, and our commitments to them is highly vibrational in the biggest scheme of things. So the energy we put into them help us increase the strength of our fifth house. It's also the significator of husband material. So a woman can be, or a man can, attraction will be like Mars. Obviously Venus for heterosexuals, the more gay couples Mars is still the attraction. But Mars obviously what we'll be attracted to, but Jupiter will be the husband material. So it's very different when a woman chooses to set up home with somebody than somebody who is just like looking good, just like thinking, are they going to be reliable when I have be set up home and have children. So Jupiter will, a really good Jupiter in somebody's female's chart will indicate that they want to have a partner for life, so they can bring and support their child, be very committed to the family. Jupiter rules the northeast of properties, generally speaking, in Vastu, and it's the condition of the chart. It shows the optimism and happiness of the person. So whether or not somebody can look at their situation like glass half full or glass half empty, and that's how their approach to life is really. So, but the good thing is, obviously, even if you have got a difficult Jupiter in your chart, with transits, we always get, even if it's not a good planet for you, I think it's much more blissful when it's in transit. And also with different dashas, it kind of really helps to activate that that Jupiter for the better. Excuse me, they're just checking my internet. So obviously the planet of opportunities, wherever it goes in the chart, you have that premise there of opportunities and situations occurring that the Jupiter will help you achieve, so you can tap into that. Jupiter is friendly with the Sun, Moon, Mars and Ketu. It's enemies with Mercury and Venus, and neutral towards Saturn. It spends roughly about a year in any sign, but it does retrograde back too during that time. But generally speaking, it takes 12 years to go around your chart, so 12-year cycle. So when you have a Jupiter return, that is 12 years have gone by. And it's a sign that allows you to explore the indications of the house and gives you opportunities, with its transits. It's exalted in Cancer at 5 degrees, the home of family, early education, nurture and stability, and love of homeland. It's debilitated at 5 degrees of Capricorn, which is sign of strive, climbing the ladder, ambition, government structure, and wanting more and more. And Motrikona is Sagittarius, 0 to 10 degrees in Mula Nakshatra, where you get to the bottom of things, build yourself a really firm foundation, and then build on that. That's what really Jupiter is best at, really. Just like, it's not a credit card, it is to do with wealth, but it's not a credit card type of wealth. It's not like Rahu. It's a type of money that gives you pleasure. So it's not necessarily always like extravagant in that sense. It's very much like build really good foundations and then have the focus, and having focus for that because of Sagittarius. Jupiter is a planet that gives you the big picture, philosophy, travel, culture and luck, happiness and wisdom, religion and spiritualities and other realms, charity. And because it's exalted in the fourth house of the natural zodiac, charity begins at home and a homeland first, and that will make you really happy. And women, especially mothers who are mothering a child, nursing a child. In Sagittarius, as I said, is focused and righteous, preaching and committed to goal-oriented and religious. In Pisces, it's open-minded, big-hearted, creative, more forgiving, bigger picture, and more spiritual rather than religious. Okay, so wherever it's kind of wherever it sits in your chart, it kind of protects that house and protects 7 houses from it by aspect, but it's got special aspects, 5th and 9th house, so a trinal one as well. So 5th house is from it. You also include the house that's sitting in. So if it's in your 1st house, aspects the 5th, 7th and 9th house. Gets directional strength in the 1st house. It's obviously in the, you can imagine it's high consciousness and high awareness spirituality, happy-go-lucky, that kind of thing. It's amazing. It's also, when it's in good condition, it can be really open-minded and tolerant, forward-looking, forward-thinking, positive and optimistic. Makes a fantastic advisor. All of these things that I'm saying, if it's in good condition, helps to move you forward. It kind of rules bankers, financiers, economists, judges, lawyers, generals. What else can I say about it? Spiritual advisors, professors, teachers, those kind of jobs, and justice. And it's also obviously rules justice, law, morals, ethics, universal law, social justice, and also it can be very idealistic and moralistic as well, because it is, you'll find that no planet is 100% brilliant, really, so there's always things going on. It is planet of joy and expansion, so the transit of that can have similar effects. Expansion, particularly if it's in the first house or aspect in the first house. But definitely, it's a first house. So respect and tolerance, affluence is all the other things that you can say about it. It rules fat, liver, high cholesterol, and edema when you actually get water retention. It rules Thursdays, colour yellow or mustard, and it also rules yellowy kind of diamonds and citron gems as well. Obviously it rules Thursdays. It's debilitated, we said, in Capricorn at 5 degrees, but it's also it's not happy in Mercury signs. Mercury and Jupiter together, because they're both planets of teaching, learning, I should say, really, because obviously Jupiter is planet of very much to do with learning and publishing, because of the 9th house. Mercury is very much like information. Mercury can be gossipy, and fast information. But whereas like Jupiter is more like wisdom and high knowledge, that kind of thing. So this is the reason why it feels a little bit nervous in those sort of, it can be a little bit like, because obviously it expands everything, and Mercury can be very sort of multi-talented. It can like give you too much of everything, so it can be a little bit exhausting. So that's why it creates problems when it's in Mercury and nakshatras, Mercury signs, being aspected with Mercury or conjunct with Mercury, because it's just like so much information, whereas like the focus goes out of Jupiter and becomes too much into everything. And obviously because it's a planet of judgment as well, so it can be a bit judgmental about those things. So I find that, like if you it almost creates problems with learning, actually. So like for example, Jupiter in Purva Bhadrapada can be like it finds it really difficult sometimes learning, but but it could be that it's much more of like a visual learner rather than theoretical, because it kind of overdoes things, and the person could be like constantly wanting to learn, and particularly in certain nakshatras and things like that, it can really give you that like, oh, I want to learn so much, but you don't really absorb the information. It's just about going through it, but not necessarily absorbing the information or application of the information. Obviously not friendly with Libra, because they're both planets benefics, but Jupiter is much more like discerning. It's kind of what it is actually. Jupiter is much more it's a little bit judgmental, whereas Venus is not judgmental. It's a teacher to everybody. It's not going to judge you in a sense that you think, oh, you come from a poor background, you come from, that kind of, your family's got money or anything like that, or maybe your family's religious or atheist. Whereas Jupiter can be a little bit more choosy about who they actually spend their time with. So you can definitely see that. Jupiter and Venus are quite an interesting one as well. So Jupiter, Venus, or Jupiter in Venus houses, it can give dissatisfaction as well, because there's always like, oh, I could, particularly in love, because Venus is planet of love. So with Venus, it can just get like, oh, it can be like, the person could be a really, really nice guy or nice lady, and they're just like, oh no, but they just did that wrong. They could be a little bit like that too. So yeah, it's interesting. So we need to like rein it in a sense. If Jupiter is in the fourth house as well, so it gives you luxurious homes and luxurious cars and things like that, because wherever it is, it's bigger than normal. That's definitely the focus. So these are the things to do with Jupiter. As I said, it's got directional strength in the first house, so it gives the person much more focus, a jovial personality, and fun to be with. I have an uncle of mine. I don't know his chart, but I can bet you bottom dollar that he has got Jupiter in the first house, because he's always struggled with his weight, and he is quite expansive. Midriff region, and he's just very fun to be with. He's just got that lovely, I wouldn't say, because sense of humor is much more to do with Mercury, but it's just the happiness, sharing, and whenever we used to go out, as a family and everything, we would stop more often than normal to eat or drink something, and he wants everybody to have fun. So that is very much Jupiter. And I think I did say, but it does rule, Jupiter rules Thursdays. So Jupiter, obviously, just wanted to say that we all get to have a go at Jupiter in the first house at some point, hopefully, if the dashas line up, Mahadasha's planetary periods occur. And definitely in transits too. So there's this. So, but also have a look at other Vargas or divisional charts. In Vedic astrology, there are plenty of them. And have a look and see what condition your Jupiter is in different Vargas. And obviously, if Jupiter, you're going through a Jupiter dasha or subdasha, but particularly if you're going to the main Mahadasha of Jupiter, you can have a look and see in different Vargas if it is in the ascendant of any of those, because they also get activated with that too. It rules 3 nakshatras, Purnavasu, which is Jupiter nakshatras are always between two signs. So it's between Gemini and the first 3 degrees 20 of Cancer. So last 10 degrees of Gemini, 20 to 30 degrees, and first 3 degrees 20 of Cancer. And then also the last 10 degrees of Libra, and the first 3 degrees 20 of Scorpio. So that's Libra and Scorpio. And then also rules last 10 degrees, and that nakshatra in between Libra and Scorpio is called Vishaka. And then we have also Purva Bhadrapada, which is the last 10 degrees, so 20 degrees to 30 degrees of Aquarius, and first 3 degrees 20 of Pisces. So these are the 3 nakshatras. So with the dasha, those 3 nakshatras will get activated. And so what else do I want to say? Yeah, so just remember that, so we all get a little bit of a go at, during those dashas. And also, just wanted to also say that everything that I'm saying is for a Jupiter that has got, I'm not considering any kind of conjunctions or aspects, just purely the house placements. Jupiter in the 5th house. This is obviously a trinal house, so it's a blessed house. It's Purva Punya, it's like good luck we bring into this life. And the only thing is Jupiter is the significator or karaka of the 5th house, because 5th house is children. So when it is in there, it is going to create some problems. And I honestly don't worry about this, because this is some of the issues that I've had, and I was told that I couldn't have children, and I did. So the trick is that you don't go really sort of, as always, I've got to say this all the time because people get so worried. Now, there are lots of things that go into having a child. So it's not just the condition of Jupiter. It's also 5th house ruler, Jupiter's condition in your D9, fifth house rules condition in the D9 and again D7, and you then also check, because every time in transits and dashas, that is what determines it. Because if you are in the wrong dasha, no matter how you try, you're not going to have that child, because the focus is not that. Your sub-dashas might do it, and then if the transits also, they have a say too. So please don't get yourself like, oh, I can't have a child. Well, if you looked at my chart, you'll definitely say, I can't have a child, but I did. I had 11 years of issues, but I did. So I don't want you to get worried about that. So fifth house is obviously a creative house, because it's third houses from third house. It's self-expression, it's mantras, it's romance, love, dating, partying, house of education, house of politics, house of sports, house of advice, that kind of thing. So it's and obviously children. It is obviously going to be great, great sign, and it's also your mother's income, resources. So, and when Jupiter goes into this sign, it's aspecting 11th house, as well as first and ninth house. And so that the position of Jupiter is normally not the most blessed thing, but the aspects are, even if for you it's functional benefic, like for Taurus or for Libra. Nonetheless, though, the aspects are going to be more blissful, as it is in transits too. I always find that. I always think, people who have difficult, it's a difficult planet for them. When in transit, it's not the same. Obviously, where it's sitting might be difficult slightly, but not generally speaking, the aspects are pretty good. Now, obviously, Jupiter, obviously, when it's retrograde, it's more passive, so you need to tap into that. You need to activate it by being more sort of expressive, do more mantras, that kind of thing. Fifth house is obviously academic education, and from there, obviously, 11th house is house of gains. So this is kind of giving blessings to your elder sibling, to your networks of friends. It's expanding that, your friendship groups, and also your gains and your desires. It actually expands it, so you'll be very desire based too. It's also aspecting the ninth house, so blessing the father, your further education, your religious beliefs, your culture, and you can become quite philosophical and travel. Although it's more like travel, like going for education and coming back. It's not necessarily settling somewhere. And obviously, by many aspects, first house, it's Jivakaraka, to do with life. So it's actually blessing your vitality. This Jupiter, if it's sitting there also and aspecting these, that you have got this amazing relationship with your father. If this sign is supportive of Jupiter, if it's a friendly planet to you, it really is very academic, very sort of well-travelled person, really, in the sense that they when they go travelling, they don't want to go just like 2 weeks, sit in the sun, do nothing. They want to see the local culture, speak to the people, visit local restaurants run by small businesses, go to museums, to the exhibitions, and find out a little bit about how people live. And maybe go a little bit off track as well, not necessarily just go to the touristy environment. They could also travel because they want to go. There's like an inspirational speaker, there's some kind of philosophical or archaeological find, and they want to go and explore that, maybe exhibitions, that kind of thing. There is kind of an education element to the way they travel, or a religious element to their travel. They could also be somebody who goes abroad for their travel, for their education too. And fifth house is also depending on the sign and the condition of Jupiter. And as you know, Jupiter is friendly with Mars, Moon, Sun. It's neutral with Saturn, friendly with Ketu, but not good with Rahu, not good with Venus or Mercury. So these kind of things can have an effect. So Jupiter could also be a general in the army, so you want to see that kind of thing. But obviously, we're just discussing today a Jupiter with no aspects, no conjunctions, and obviously a Jupiter that is exalted in own sign is going to be delivering completely different level of wisdom than one that is like a debilitated Jupiter can be, because this is obviously house of investments and accumulation of wealth and things like that. And education. It could be just like they're not as educated, maybe, and maybe they've had some levels of difficulties in that kind of thing. But you know that Jupiter is always going to get better with time, so it's not one of those planets that if it's debilitated then it's going to actually affect you in any way for the rest of your life. That's not true. And remember that every single dasha changes things, and it's not necessarily what you're born with, it's how you work with your chart to improve it. If you're constantly looking at it and just like seeing negativity, that is what you're going to manifest. So you just got to just see this is it's an expansion of your mind as well. So Jupiter here will be very philosophical and could be quite. It won't be creative as Venus. That's what I just want to say though. It's never going to be that kind of. Like it won't be like a media kind of thing like Venus will be. Venus and Mercury will be like mainstream media. Jupiter will be like completely different. It'll be like wants to leave something to the world that is more longer lasting, that kind of thing. Because it's a social. It's like Saturn and Jupiter. Their transit slower. So what they do is a bit more longer lasting. So let's have a look at the ascendants now. Thank you. Jupiter in the 5th house. For Aries ascendant, Jupiter rules 9th and 12th house. So 12th house is very much a impressionable house, so it's not going to spoil anything. However, it is to do with far distance travel, and when he includes the 9th house and then goes into an education house, you can see that this person, for their higher academic education, they could go abroad. And also it could be a boarding school, or it could be like a military school, that kind of thing, because the sign that they go into is Leo. And it's a nice sign for Jupiter as well. It's a friendly sign to it. But it will be something to do with very high level education in that sense. But it is nice because it kind of, Jupiter is now really in a friendly sign and rules a nice trine. For Taurus ascendant, Jupiter is not a very good planet. It rules 11th house and 8th house. Now, 8th house obviously doesn't upset any kind of yogas as such, but it does create losses. It does create sudden changes and ups and downs. So they could have problems having children. It could be delayed. They could have some issues and then end up like having the child a bit later or something. But it will give you some difficulties, that's for sure. However, it's also 11th house ruler in the 5th house, and even though it's not a good sign for them being in Virgo, but however, it's still a done yoga, and it's still Jupiter that is aspecting the 11th house, Pisces, protecting own signs. So they will gain. And 11th house is desire. So that if there's a desire for a child, they will eventually have the child, providing there is not other issues in D7 and D9, that kind of thing. You've got to check Jupiter in everything, and the fifth house ruler. But generally speaking, you know, there could be some ups and downs, or it could also be ups and downs with your groups of friends, you know, so you can have some losses, disappointments, and sudden changes in groups of friends too. But 11th house is like an upachaya house, so eventually things do work out, because we do become a bit more educated about our desires and wishes, and once that settles, then it does actually, we learn, Jupiter teaches us the wisdom. And for Gemini ascendant, so Gemini ascendant, this is 7th and 10th house ruler. When he goes in the 5th house, will be in Libra. Creates lovely Raj yogas. However, Jupiter is not, obviously, it's not friendly towards Venus, so it can create some issues. However, this will be a very romantic relationship, very creative job, and this also means this person is could be in media, could be a political correspondent or military correspondent. It could be those kinds of jobs where they will also travel with the job, because 7th house is naturally travel too. But yeah, so it's a nice placement because of the sheer fact that, you know, it creates jobs such as in justice, judiciary, that kind of thing too. Then for Cancer ascendant, this will be Jupiter in the 5th house, will be Jupiter in Scorpio. Jupiter is 6th and 9th house ruler going into Scorpio. Jupiter does well in Scorpio because it's a friendly sign and it can deal with issues of Scorpio. However, for Cancer ascendant, although Jupiter rules 9th house, which is a lovely trinal house, he also rules the 6th house, and 6th house can spoil yogas. So although it goes into the 5th house, however, from this house, Jupiter is going to aspect the 9th house. So it's going to protect education, the family, religious beliefs, those kind of, all those wonderful things to do with the 9th house. It is going to kind of damage, maybe, you know, they could have discord with their dad. They could have, like, having children could create some kind of debt or something. Or obstacle having children, you know, it can also do the delaying thing. But, you know, over time this does get better, because 6th house, after all, is an upachaya house. And it just needs perseverance. For Leo ascendant, 5th house is Jupiter in Sagittarius, own sign, so it's actually nice and strong there. Obviously, for them, Jupiter also rules 8th house. So again, you see this situation where Jupiter will be in good condition, own sign, but there will be some issues having children. There could be some issues, kind of like some breaks in education, some sudden changes in having children. That kind of stuff can happen for sure. But obviously this is not going to be in any way like for Taurus ascendant, because after all, for Leo, this is a good planet for them, and it's in good dignity in Sagittarius. But they could definitely give somebody who's a really good teacher, very creative in the sense that they could write books, publish books, very culturally important books, I would say, to do with whatever religious or cultural things that they're into. That could be pretty good. For Virgo ascendant, Jupiter rules 7th and 4th house. When it's in the 5th house, Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. So this is not going to be as strong, clearly. And this is more a Jupiter that's going to create wealth, in a sense. Jupiter in Capricorn is not going to be as bad as like a Saturn debilitated or Sun debilitated in any sense like that. But it's still going to be more financially astute, more towards, because also in Capricorn is a sign that is Jupiter is very upward looking, just because the nature of the sign. It's also a movable sign, so their fortunes can get better. So it's not, although it might give you some difficulties to begin with, over time it does get better. So, you know, they want to earn money, they want to have family, they want to get married, and with that they want to also have status, that kind of thing too. And so, you know, that can give them some problems with the family and in their relationship. However, from there, you know, it's also creating Raj Yoga's 4th house ruler in the 5th, 7th house ruler in the 5th. They're quite romantic, though. They're quite romantic, love children. They might also be in the education system where they're teaching students in a structured governmental thing. Then for Libra ascendant, this is 3rd and 6th house ruler. When it's in the 5th house, Jupiter will be in Aquarius. So it's neutral sign, and it's a sign that obviously delays things naturally because of the nature of Saturn ruling that sign. It's obviously not debilitated in this sign, and it's also 5th house is the natural 11th house of the zodiac. So it's much more likely to work with other people, this Jupiter. And so this person will be, obviously 6th house is work also, and it doesn't create really, you know, it's obviously somebody who is quite creative because there's 3rd house rule in the 5th house, but it could be that somebody who's working in education or some kind of like service job, you know, it could even be in medical situation, and they literally have put a lot of effort into their job, and through the efforts, because both 3rd and 6th house get better with time, they will actually have a good career, and they will teach and guide people. They could become really good advisors as such too, and they will gain through that advice. Then for Scorpio ascendant, 2nd and 5th house ruler in the 5th house, Jupiter will be 5th house ruler in the 5th house. So Jupiter will be in good condition. It's a really good placement for money because it's just naturally just creates a really good Dhan yoga of wealth. These people obviously will be quite astute when it comes to accumulation of wealth. They'll be educated, etc. They're all those kind of things that could be, and they'll be really close to their family, very lovely. They could also have like very, very religious family too, because their 2nd house is Sagittarius. They go traveling and quite cultured, quite. They get a lot of joy from being with family and having all the family, you know, grandchildren, children, everybody around to just enjoy being together, or even travel together too. Now for Sagittarius ascendant, Jupiter rules 1st and 4th house. When it's in the 5th house, Jupiter will be in Aries, which is a friendly sign to Jupiter. And this will be... these people will literally, they'll be very, very adventurous. They would want to invest that in their education. They're quite focused about how they do their, you know, their family and themselves. They literally are focused to actually create better situations, better wealth and everything for themselves, for their family and their mum, that kind of thing. And the 4th house is also education. When he goes in the 5th house, this person could be very much invest a lot of things in their education. They also would want to have groups of friends who are also are educated and they're from their homeland, or even if they just literally care about their happiness, their happiness, and their focus and their energy will go into children, their student, their family, their own happiness, all of that kind of thing. So this will be a really nice placement actually, and it'll be quite an adventurous, quite maybe even sporty, more sporty than anything. But it could also be quite they do more military things like cadets and things like that. The whole family could have that kind of focus. It's just quite a nice placement. Jupiter does kind of tones down the whole Martian thing to do with this sign. They could also really have nice cars too, because fourth house is, they could have luxury cars, fast. They will drive that fast, that's for sure. Capricorn ascendant, for you, Jupiter rules 3rd and 12th house. When it goes in the 5th house, this is clearly somebody who loves to be communicating, loves to be creative, because obviously Venus is sign, even though it's not a friendly sign to Jupiter. But what it does, it will be quite a creative. It'll be very good at writing poetry. Will be quite philosophical writer. It could also be that somebody is very much into writing to do with like travel, day trips, that kind of thing. Could be the theme there. But this is Jupiter for Capricorn ascendant. It just rules very difficult houses. So this is a little bit like Cancer. Mercury is the Cancer. So they just literally they're not that great at communicating. So they can lose friends through that. There could be misunderstandings, that kind of thing. But what will happen, it does get better with time, and they just realize that, they don't want to get themselves into trouble by not communicating well. And the more they communicate, and the more they actually learn skills, invest in doing courses and things to self-improve, that kind of thing, then their creativity kicks in, and they can actually be very good, skillful, creative writers. And also they could just like, travel could really kick in that creativity for them, and they can write more, they can do more self-expressive. Sorry, the lighting suddenly changed here, and I do prefer to be in daylight, but maybe I should put the light on. So now for Aquarius ascendant. Aquarius ascendant, for you, Jupiter is your money planet. It rules for your 2nd and 11th house. When it is in the 5th house, it's actually aspecting 11th house, really protecting the 11th house. Good gains for that. So it's going to be a money making machine. This is really good for investment. These people could be like dealing with shares, stocks and shares, and really good. They'd be astute. They'd be really, because this Jupiter in Gemini, they get all the information and data, really sort of like they go through it, and they will make really good sound decisions on that. When it comes to money, they're very astute, because they just know how to research it and get the right information, and they got really good friends who can help them with that too. So it's a nice placement for money. For Pisces ascendant, Jupiter rules 1st and 10th house. So when it goes in the 5th house, Jupiter will be exalted in Cancer. So it's going to be pretty amazing. It's going to also aspect the 1st house, so protecting the 1st house. And the person will be highly intelligent, highly, creative job, more self-expressive, because the nature of Cancer makes Jupiter very knowledgeable, very expressive, very nurturing. They make great teachers, and highly knowledgeable and sensitive. They can also travel, because of the nature of Jupiter being in a sign. Cancer is overseas. Very nice. They could make great advisors, educators, professors. They could be very inspirational speakers. They could also be like maybe even, because their 10th house is Sagittarius, they could also be like preachers, priests, that kind of thing too. So that's it from me. I'll see you next time. Thank you.